In the winter of 1873, fog rolled thick through London's cobbled streets. Amidst the horse-drawn carriages and gas lamps, posters began to appear overnight. Their bold letters screamed, "Marvel of the century! The boy with 3 legs, one night only." Children tugged at their mothers' sleeves to ask what it meant, while men in tall hats scoffed, and women whispered with morbid curiosity. Behind those posters was a frightened boy named Edwin Carroway, only 14 years old. He had been born with an extra leg that jutted awkwardly from his hip, and while his mother once told him he was a miracle, the world only saw him as an oddity. Poverty had driven his family into despair, and a traveling showman named Mr. Silas Greaves had offered them money they couldn't refuse. That night, Edwin would debut in London, not as a child, but as a spectacle. His heart pounded knowing the city would soon know his secret. The inside of the freak show tent smelled of sawdust and sweat. Colored lamps flickered, shadows leaping against the patched canvas walls. Edwin sat on a wooden crate, his small hands trembling as he tried to cover himself with an oversized tunic. His extra leg, a third, thinner limb, dangled at his side, twitching nervously. Mr. Greaves towered over him, cane tapping against the floor. His voice was oily, cruel. "Don't forget to limp, boy. Make it dramatic. The worse you look, the more they'll laugh, and the more they'll pay." Edwin lowered his head, cheeks burning with shame. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't some curiosity to be sold. He wanted to run, to hide, to vanish into the foggy night outside. But the iron chain of hunger kept him bound. His family needed the money. So, when the muffled roar of the waiting audience shook the tent, Edwin forced his shaking body upright. From a slit in the curtain, Edwin dared to peek at the sea of faces waiting in the tent. They came from all corners of the city. Wealthy merchants with gold-tipped canes, young couples whispering behind gloved hands, even ragged street urchins who had paid a single coin to glimpse the unnatural boy. Their voices buzzed in a cruel harmony. "Is it true?" one man chuckled. "A boy with 3 legs? Disgusting," muttered a woman, though her eyes glittered with curiosity. Another whispered, "Perhaps he's part demon." Edwin's stomach churned. He wished desperately for one kind face, one smile of reassurance. Instead, all he saw was hunger, not for food, but for entertainment at his expense. To them, he wasn't human. He was a story to retell in smoky taverns later. He pressed his forehead to the curtain, praying for it to all end quickly. The spotlight, a crude lantern hung high, flickered as Mr. Greaves strode onto the stage. He struck the floor with his cane. "Ladies and gentlemen," he bellowed, "prepare your eyes for nature's strangest mistake. I present to you the boy with 3 legs." The curtain was yanked aside, and Edwin stumbled into the light. Gasps and cries rippled through the crowd as he lifted his tunic, revealing the limb. Some clapped wildly, others sneered. Children pointed and laughed. Mr. Greaves ordered him to walk, to turn, to stumble, showing off the strange limb like an exhibit. Edwin's ears rang with jeers. His chest tightened with shame so strong he could barely breathe. In that moment, he wanted nothing more than to vanish into the earth. But through the blur of faces, one pair of eyes met his, eyes that didn't mock, didn't laugh. A girl with golden curls and a simple bonnet looked at him differently, with kindness. Edwin clung to that single pair of eyes as if they were a lifeline. The girl, seated near the middle of the audience, was about his age. She didn't cover her mouth to giggle or whisper cruelly to her neighbor. She simply looked at him, steady and gentle, as though she saw him. For the first time that night, Edwin felt warmth. He forced himself through the rest of the performance, limping, spinning clumsily as Mr. Greaves commanded, but in his heart, he held on to that gaze. When the show ended and the audience thundered with applause, Edwin fled behind the curtain, tears burning in his eyes. Yet he carried with him a strange flicker of hope. Perhaps he wasn't invisible to everyone. Perhaps someone, somewhere, could look beyond his deformity. The performance grew crueler with every passing night. Mr. Greaves devised new ways to make Edwin into a joke. Sometimes he tripped him deliberately, laughing when the crowd roared. Other times he forced him to dance clumsily to the scratch of a fiddle. "Spin, boy! Show them the leg!" The audience always obliged, jeering, clapping, throwing coins as if he were a trained animal. Edwin's humiliation deepened with every show, but through the sea of cruel eyes he searched for her, the girl with the bonnet. She came often, always watching silently, never laughing. And though Edwin barely knew her name, her presence gave him strength. Every cruel taunt, every jeer, felt less sharp when he remembered her steady gaze. One night after the show, Edwin sat alone behind the tent, knees hugged tight against his chest. He heard a rustle. Startled, he looked up, and there she was. The girl stepped from the shadows carrying a small basket. "You're not strange," she whispered softly. "You're just different. What's your name?" His throat tightened. "Edwin." She smiled, warm and sincere. "I'm Clara." She offered him a piece of bread from her basket. "I thought you might be hungry." He hesitated, then accepted. As he ate, she sat quietly beside him, unafraid of his deformity. For the first time since his parents had sold him, Edwin felt human again. Clara began visiting regularly, slipping behind the tent when Mr. Greaves wasn't watching. She brought Edwin scraps of food, secondhand books, even a small wooden flute one evening. "I think you could play beautifully," she encouraged. Edwin, though shy, began to practice in secret. At first, the notes were clumsy, but soon soft melodies filled the dark corners of the tent. Each tune freed him from the chains of mockery, if only for a little while. Their friendship grew into something sacred. Clara never treated him like a curiosity. She spoke to him as an equal, laughed at his jokes, listened to his fears. She gave him what he craved most, dignity, yet always a shadow of fear lingered. If Mr. Greaves discovered Clara's kindness, he would destroy it. But Mr. Greaves did not soften. His cruelty sharpened like a knife. Each night he pushed Edwin harder, longer performances, more humiliating tricks. "You're worth nothing as a man," Greaves hissed one evening, jabbing him with his cane. "But as a freak, you're gold." Edwin's spirit bent under the weight of those words. The world seemed destined to see him only as a mistake. Yet Clara's visits kept a fragile flame alive inside him. She reminded him of something he barely dared to believe, that he was more than what others called him. One night, rain lashed the tent roof, and the audience thinned. Clara slipped in, her cloak dripping wet. She handed Edwin a small book of poetry. "Promise me something," she said earnestly. "What?" "That you won't let him or anyone convince you that you're less. One day, you'll see. Your difference will be your strength." Edwin traced the worn cover of the book. Her words sank deep, lighting a small lantern in the storm of his despair. He nodded silently. Clara smiled, and for the first time, he believed her. The night came when Edwin could bear the jeers no longer. As the crowd shouted for him to dance, he felt the broken weight of humiliation press down again. His body trembled, but his heart whispered Clara's words. "Your difference will be your strength." With a sudden defiance, Edwin pulled the wooden flute from his pocket. Gasps echoed as he lifted it to his lips. Mr. Greaves barked, "What are you doing, boy?" "Dance." But Edwin ignored him. A trembling note rose, thin at first, then steady. The crowd hushed. The haunting tune floated above the tent, weaving sorrow and beauty into the air. The laughter died away, replaced by stillness. For a few sacred minutes, no one saw a freak. They saw an artist. When the final note faded, silence lingered. Then, softly at first, came applause. Not mockery, not jeers, true applause. Edwin's chest swelled with a feeling he had never known. Pride. But pride came with a price. Backstage, Mr. Greaves struck Edwin across the face, his cane snapping against the boy's skin. "You dare defy me?" he thundered. He ripped the flute from Edwin's hand and with a cruel smile snapped it in half. The pieces clattered to the floor. Edwin fell to his knees, tears spilling freely. That flute had been Clara's gift, the symbol of freedom, of dignity. Now it lay broken like his spirit. "You are mine," Greaves growled, shoving him back toward the crate, "and you will do as I say. You're nothing without me, nothing but a monster." Edwin curled in the shadows that night, clutching the broken flute pieces. His heart ached, yet Clara's words still burned faintly in his mind. "Your difference will be your strength." Clara found him the next evening, eyes wide with worry when she saw the bruises. Edwin tried to hide them, but she saw. "He hurt you again, didn't he?" Edwin nodded silently. Her face hardened with determination. "Then we can't wait any longer. You have to leave this place." "But where would I go?" His voice cracked. "My brother runs a printing shop. He can give you honest work. You're clever, Edwin. You could learn to read better, to write. You could have a real life." Edwin's heart raced. The thought of freedom was terrifying, almost impossible. "What if they laugh at me out there too?" he whispered. Clara took his hand firmly. "Then let them laugh. But at least you'll be free. At least you'll be more than a caged boy." For the first time, Edwin let himself imagine a future beyond the tent. The night they chose was stormy, the streets slick with rain. Clara waited by the back of the tent, her hood pulled low. Edwin slipped away after the show, his heart pounding in his chest. They ran through the narrow alleys, splashing through puddles, lungs burning. For a moment, Edwin felt weightless. The chains of humiliation seemed to fall away with every step. Clara laughed breathlessly beside him, gripping his hand tightly. The world beyond the freak show stretched wide and unknown. For the first time, Edwin dared to believe he might belong somewhere else, somewhere he could be more than a mistake. But shadows moved swiftly behind them, and the sound of heavy boots on cobblestones shattered the fragile dream. Mr. Greaves's hand clamped down on Edwin's collar, yanking him backward into the mud. Clara screamed, but Greaves shoved her aside. His eyes blazed with fury. "You belong to me," he roared, shaking Edwin like a rag doll. "You think you can escape? You are my gold mine, boy, my monster." Edwin struggled, tears mixing with rain, but Greaves's grip was iron. Clara shouted for help, her voice breaking in desperation. But the streets were empty, and those who glimpsed the scene turned away. No one dared interfere with the infamous showman. That night, Edwin was chained in the tent like an animal. His wrists burned, his heart shattered. His dream of freedom felt crushed beyond repair. Clara's face, pale with fear, haunted him in the darkness. The next performance came. Edwin, bruised and broken, stood once more before the crowd. His chains had been removed, but the weight of them still clung to his skin. The audience laughed as always, urging him to stumble, to dance. Greaves barked orders from the side of the stage, yet something inside Edwin shifted. He thought of Clara's unwavering eyes, her words echoing like a drumbeat in his soul. "Your difference will be your strength." Slowly, deliberately, Edwin raised his head. His voice trembled at first, then grew firm. "I am not a mistake," he said aloud. The laughter faltered. The crowd leaned forward. Greaves froze. "I am more than what you see. I am not your monster." A hush fell over the tent. For the first time, Edwin spoke not as a freak, but as a boy with a voice. Instead of dancing, Edwin reached into his pocket and pulled out the battered book of poetry Clara had given him. His hand shook, but his voice steadied as he began to read. At first, only a few listened. Then, as the words flowed, rich, aching, beautiful, the tent grew still. The mocking smiles faded. A strange silence settled, heavy with awe. Greaves shouted furiously from the sidelines, "Stop this nonsense. Perform as I command." But Edwin ignored him. His voice carried over the crowd, defying every jeer, every insult ever hurled at him. In that moment, he was not the boy with 3 legs. He was a poet, a human soul reaching out to others. When he finished, the silence held for a long moment, before the crowd erupted into applause. Not cruel clapping, genuine applause. Edwin's heart soared. Greaves stormed forward, cane raised, ready to strike Edwin down in front of everyone. But something extraordinary happened. A man in the crowd rose to his feet and shouted, "Leave him be." Others joined in. "Let the boy speak. Bravo! Shame on you, showman." The audience surged with anger, not against Edwin, but against his tormentor. Greaves froze as several men blocked his path, forcing him back. He sneered, but he knew better than to provoke a mob. His power crumbled in the face of their defiance. Clara stood at the back, her hands clasped to her chest, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, Edwin stood on stage not as property, not as a joke, but as a person with dignity. The boy with 3 legs had become a voice no one could silence. In the days that followed, the freak show tent stood empty. Mr. Greaves slunk away into obscurity, his cruelty finally unmasked. Edwin, free at last, walked into Clara's brother's printing shop with trembling steps. At first, people still stared when he entered. A boy with 3 legs was not easily forgotten. But Edwin held his head high, no longer shrinking beneath their gaze. Clara's brother, a kind man with ink-stained hands, welcomed him warmly. "Here, lad, you'll learn letters, words, stories. We'll teach you to print and to write your own." And so Edwin began anew. Each day he learned to shape words, to set ink to paper, to give voice to thoughts that had long been caged inside him. Slowly, the world began to see not the deformity, but the mind and heart of the boy. Years passed. Edwin grew into a man, his limp still noticeable, his extra leg still there. But now, it no longer defined him. Instead, he had become a writer. His first book bore the title, "The Boy with 3 Legs." In the dedication, he wrote, "To Clara, who taught me that freedom is not in the number of legs we stand on, but in the courage we walk with." The book spread across London, then beyond. People whispered not about a freak, but about a poet who had endured cruelty and turned it into beauty. Edwin had transformed pain into power, shame into strength. And when children whispered about the boy with 3 legs, it was not with mockery, but with wonder, respect, and hope. The boy once caged in a tent had become a voice that inspired a generation.